All right. So we got our next chapter kind of looks at other ways that businesses set up and with imperfect competition. So we've got a number of cases where we have firms with market power, and I've got a little video to start us off here. We remember the I Love Lucy was kind of highlighting the competitive market, where they were trying to sell those hamburgers right next door to each other. And so here's one that kind of hints at market power.
Welcome aboard. It's 2007 and we are more committed to your safety than ever. And that's why we'd like you to pay careful attention to this important safety information. First, please make sure that your seatbelt is securely fastened. Seatbelts can be purchased for $5. To fasten, insert the metal fitting into the buckle and tighten the buckle by pulling the loose end away from you. To release, purchase a release flap for $7. Now I know what you're thinking. We've never paid for seatbelts before. Once we've reached our cruising altitude, your flight attendant may or may not go down the aisle with snacks. If she chooses to, each passenger will be given a single peanut. Lavatories are located at the front and the rear of the airport. Please take a moment to look at your safety pamphlet. The charge for looking at this pamphlet is $3. The charge for looking at this pamphlet and putting it back quickly is $4. Should there be a rapid change in cabin pressure, oxygen masks will automatically drop from the compartment above your seat, free of charge. Place the mask over your nose and mouth. And to start the flow of oxygen, pay your flight attendant $75.63. As always, exact change is appreciated. Now I know that some of you are still concerned about getting there safely. Enjoy your flight.
All right, so market power is the discussion today. Market power. So what was at the other end of our spectrum of competition?
Monopoly.
What was it?
Monopoly.
Monopoly. All right, so one seller, and if you're the only show in town, how did you get that power? This is flat. How did you get market power? So look at the characteristics of monopoly. We did those 3 characteristics with each one. And how did that power come about?
Single product.
Same product.
Barriers to entry.
Barriers to entry was the big one, right? So the 3 characteristics we had was we have just one seller. And so we had a homogeneous product because we had a single product and there was only one show in town. So this is a single product. And what we're going to start off with is a single price monopoly. And number 3 was the big one. So barriers to entry. Barriers to entry. Okay, so what can cause there to be barriers to entry? So we mentioned a few of them. So imagine some businesses. What are some modern day monopolies? Give me some examples of what you think. Sam?
McDonald's.
What's that?
McDonald's.
McDonald's. Okay, McDonald's, a monopoly. So one seller, what's their product?
Oh, burgers.
Burgers. Is there another company that sells burgers?
Can we say that burgers?
Big Mac.
Big Mac. So that's a fast food hamburger, right, is what we described. So is McDonald's a monopoly?
No, I said
No.
I said
So I'm looking for something, so McDonald's would probably fall into a monopolistic competition that we touched on last night. It's a pretty competitive environment for fast food hamburgers. We could even think of it as being just fast food in general, whether it's Chick-fil-A selling all chicken versus McDonald's hamburgers, right? There's some substitutability of where we go for fast food burgers. So here I'm trying to think of any businesses that really basically it's one seller.
Traction.
What's that?
Traction. It's an animal antibiotics type thing.
What's it called?
Draxxin.
Draxxin.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's animal antibiotics
Pretty much.
is what they sell.
Yeah.
And is there any other antibiotic that's being made for it? What sort of animals, by the way?
It's cattle, hogs, everything like that.
Okay.
Traxxin's like just one of them. Like a kid on Island Neck, there's like 3 different companies.
Okay, so there's 3 different companies.
No, for Island Neck, Traxxin's like just one company, just only Traxxin.
Okay, it's kind of like McDonald's hamburger. There's another alternative that can be used instead of their product. Like ibuprofen, right? We got, what's our ibuprofen? Advil, Aleve, and then you've got the generic Walmart brands, right? But they're all different substitutes. So there's a few sellers, which we're going to get into in this chapter too, by the way. Maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea. Characteristics of monopoly. Let's do characteristics of oligopoly. That's in this chapter as well. So the chapter is titled Price Searcher Markers with Barriers to Entry. So what was the number of sellers with oligopoly on your spectrum of competition? What's that? Multiple sellers, like thousands?
No.
A few. So few sellers. Now I wouldn't doubt if the cattle antibiotic market, there's probably a few, right? So a lot of the pharmaceutical companies might fall into this type of category. And so there's a few sellers, and then what type of product with a few sellers? On your spectrum of competition that we did earlier. Similar products, so that's the differentiated product. Can it be homogeneous too, though?
Yeah.
Yes, so it's both. So differentiated, which is similar, is a good word, other way to say that. Differentiated or homogeneous products, basically identical products. So it doesn't really matter what they're selling. Homogeneous product. And then there's also barriers to entry. Okay, so I'm guessing that this the pharmaceutical industry probably would fall into that category with what Jensen brought up. Did I see another hand back there? Do you have an example? What's your name again? Oriana.
Yeah. Say Microsoft.
Microsoft. Okay. So, and I guess let's be a little more specific. Like, what product of Microsoft? Since they have lots of products, right? So here we're not thinking of a single product, but Microsoft has. But I want some real world stuff in here. So, what were you thinking when you thought Microsoft?
Like their
The machine, the software that they do? Okay. So we got their Windows products, right, and their operating system. Ben?
Like the gaming consoles?
Gaming consoles. Again, is it one seller or a few sellers?
Dude, oh, she said.
With gaming consoles, give me some examples of them.
You have to play like PlayStation.
PlayStation,
Xbox,
Xbox, Nintendo.
Wii.
There might be a couple more other ones in there, but that probably falls into this category potentially, right? Does anybody have anything with one seller? So does Microsoft have competitors, by the way, for the operating system? Who's their number one competitor? Apple, right? So there's a Mac. But the operating system's pretty specific, and they have been accused of using their market power. So there's a kind of a famous lawsuit that Microsoft had to back off on requiring, they would put their Microsoft Word and some other products on their operating system. So when you bought a new PC off the shelf, which might have been a different company like IBM or something, and their operating system was there, they were basically trying to sell or tie their other products to them, right? So that you would be, oh, just click this button if you want to write a paper. Oh, I need to write papers for college. Boom, I'll click it, right? And it was right there. So they were using a little too much power because everybody was using their operating system, and so they ended up having a lawsuit that part of what we talk about in this chapter, an antitrust lawsuit. So there's still a few sellers, so we're probably dropping back down to here. Augie?
What about, like, I know this one's like area based, but like water one, like length that you're forced to have water one.
Okay, so what? So you're talking about like public utilities?
Yeah, public utilities.
Okay, so yeah, your water at your house. You turn on the faucet. How much water do you get to choose from that comes through your pipes? Do you get multiple? Is it like going to McDonald's or going to a fast food place? Can you choose multiple places? No. So there is a monopoly on the local utilities usually. Natural gas, water, electricity, all the stuff coming to your house is a form of a monopoly where there's only one seller that's been designated to do that. Now, is there alternatives? Well, yeah, I don't have to use natural gas. Maybe I could use electricity. I could use propane maybe, or in some cases in some cities, not everywhere. Kalen?
With the part with few sellers, what about patents?
Okay, good. So that's going to be the barriers. So let's put types of barriers. So number one is a good one, patents. So what's a patent? Kalen, you kind of led this. What do you know about patents? You don't have to know all the details, but just kind of.
Invents, say a regulator or something like that.
Yep.
They make a patent for it so that when other people start using that or making one, they have to, they have to pay something to use it.
Yeah, they have to pay it, or they can't use it, or they can't copy it, or they can't sell it. So patents are used, so it's usually I think it's still true, a 17-year patent that the government gives you, like you came up with a new invention. And so what we're really getting into there is the area of intellectual property. Intellectual property rights. So remember, we have, if we have a country that is supporting good rule of law, police and courts that support your individual property rights. If you own a car and somebody smashes into it, then you can sue them, right? Or if you have damages. If they did it maliciously because they were drunk, they're going to go to jail, right? So there might be some criminal charges along with that. So it's easy to think about property as your car and physical things, but intellectual property is also out there that we want to try to protect so that we create a marketplace where people aren't afraid to come up with new inventions and new ideas. So with patents, it's usually a new invention or process that you can get 17 years worth of monopoly. So this is the government granting you a monopoly, but only for 17 years. So that means you better make use of it and do something as quickly as you can.
Can you renew patents?
No. So what companies will try to do is like make a new little version or a little change or something. But basically, once the 17-year window is out, then the copycats come up. Now, what happens when the copycats come out? What happens to the price of that product? Plummets, right? So that's going to make the good really cheap. So that's exactly why we have patents in the first place, is to, if we didn't have patent rights and intellectual property rights, and we just had copycats, who would want to invent stuff? Does it take money to invent stuff, and time and resources, possibly millions of dollars? Do sometimes companies or people privately invest in something new that they think is going to solve a problem in the world for somebody? Yeah, right? So we want them to come up with that new stuff. And so the government has developed a way to say, we're going to let you have this monopoly. We're going to punish people that copy you, but you only got 17 years, so go, right? So start making your product, make your millions back, recoup your investment. because once that 17-year window's done, it's just fair game for anybody to do it.
So do all iPhones like have a different patent? Or
That's a good question. I don't know. So Justice asked, do all iPhones have a different patent? My guess is that there's always some sort of new technologies going into it, into the hardware with the three cameras or something. But another company can make changes that, as long as they're not being identical to it, that it's a pretty close substitute. And they have their own stuff. So it might not even be under patent because it might not be worth the money in some cases. For big corporations, it might not be a big deal, but this can be fairly expensive to go through the patent process. I think the last number I heard before was like $50,000 by the time you pay attorneys to prepare documents, to submit to the government, and whatever the government fee is. It can be pretty expensive to get a patent. Okay, anything else there? Yeah?
Where's like the fine line to copy something that's patentable?
It's up for a judge. So basically what happens is the inventor of the thing finds a copycat and drops a lawsuit on him. And you're going to court, unless you cease and desist. So usually there'd be a cease and desist type of order maybe, that they quit making it. But otherwise it's going to go in front of a judge, and the judge is going to make the decision like, no, this is different enough, or it's not. So there's a lot of times bluffing that goes on. Like if it's somebody feels like they've made a different enough thing, they'll drop a lawsuit on them, and they're like, screw you, I'll go to court. My attorney says that we're in the right, and so things can get negotiated that way. Okay, so that's one type. So also under that category, what else does the government grant in terms of kind of similar to patents, but it falls under other things? How about with music? Copyrights. So copyrights, trademarks, so patents. So we can do patents and we can do copyright and trademarks. So Coca-Cola has that. Now these do not have the 17-year window, right? So these are indefinitely. So as long as they pay their fee, you can't have the Coca-Cola logo. Coca-Cola can come and sue you for using something that's close. And then same thing with music. You guys have probably heard of some artists that have been blamed for copying music, like the beat to a song. Those are kind of interesting. Like, that's like the opening beat to an old Mick Jagger song, right, or something. And so sometimes the modern artist in 2020 is getting sued by the old guy who came up with it 40 years ago. There's been a few cases like that. Again, that just comes up to a judge to decide, is it close enough or is it different enough? And then if it is close enough, what's the damages, right? So you stole my intellectual property and you just made millions off that song. There's been some songs that have come out that have really, hit the charts, and then they've gotten paid or gotten fame from it. And so now the judge is going to say, I think you owe about, it looks like you made 10 million off that. I think you owe 5 of it at least to this other person. So again, the judge kind of making decisions on if property rights were violated. Okay, what else? Another barrier to entry. What would cause, why do we not have multiple electric companies? So to bring it back to utilities, what would cause us not to have, 4 different electric companies to choose from at our house for all of our electric wiring? What would be, why not do that?
Power lines?
Power lines, yeah, it'd get kind of messy you'd have to have individual power lines from each power company coming in. So that would be pretty costly to do, right? And probably very inefficient. So one of the things that can cause barriers is just a high cost of entry. So we're talking startup cost. So for example, if you want to build airplanes, Does anybody know the two major airplane companies that build airplanes? You've heard of them. I don't know if you'll be able to remember them. Boeing's one of them, and the other one's a British company. So you might not know that one quite as much, but Airbus. Boeing and Airbus were kind of historically the airplane builders. There's been a few other ones that are out there too, but Boeing and Airbus. How much do one of those suckers cost to build? I don't know, but it's a lot, right? So if you want to start building airplanes, it's going to be a pretty expensive venture. So it's not something that you roll out of bed and say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I know what I want to make. I've always dreamt I want to build airplanes. And then you start an airplane business. You're going to run into that barrier very quickly, that you're going to have to attract some major money to compete. And then what's your likelihood of developing something that's new and novel to the market that your airplane would be preferred over Boeing and Airbus? Probably next to nothing, right? Like, what the heck could you come up with that would be so revolutionary that these companies that have been around for a long time wouldn't have already done in some way, shape, or form? So pretty tough to get into it that way.
I was gonna ask, I think that back off when we were talking about the one seller, and you were asking like what companies monopolize. My question to that was, really in this day and age, is there any really businesses that's kind of monopolized, or companies monopolized? I feel like it's always like a generic version of like the company.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of the moral of the story for a true monopoly, is that for the most part they don't exist. So when I put up the spectrum of competition, at the one end of the spectrum was perfect competition, identical goods, thousands of buyers and sellers, but thousands of sellers if we're talking about the supply side, and then free entry and exit, right? And at the other end was one seller, all of this stuff here with barriers to entry. But so in reality, the bookends don't exist, but it kind of gives us our theoretical way to push the envelope out to perfect competition and push it out to monopoly. Reality's in the middle, that whatever your one thing you're selling, there's probably alternatives and substitutes out there, and ways to do it. So government-driven monopolies are probably the most popular thing that's out there. And again, they're not really a monopoly forever. Eventually they disappear. Okay, so we mentioned what happens with the cocaine dealer when you go into their territory trying to sell your cocaine. Your cocaine gives a better high than their cocaine, so you go into their territory. What happens to your friends and family from the movies? Death, dismemberment, broken arms to your children and other things. So there could be violence, death, broken arms. You guys have watched the movies. Does that stuff happen in real life?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you betcha. Here in the United States, yes, but to a lesser extent. But developing countries and stuff, that's still pretty common. So violence and death and broken arms and limbs, that can all be a barrier to entry in different markets. And they can be legal markets, like the product that they're selling might be bananas or avocados, right? But in a developing country where the courts and the police can be bought off with some money, then this can be a real barrier to entry to start selling bananas in their town. It doesn't have to be cocaine. So it's not always illegal markets where violence could be some sort of barrier to entry. Okay, any other thoughts? There's one other main one, and that is the control of a key resource. Control of a key resource can help create a barrier to entry. So De Beers diamonds is kind of a famous case. De Beers diamonds. So over the years, they basically owned the diamond mines. So one company was able to control diamonds. Therefore, if you want to make something out of diamonds or diamond rings or be a buyer, then you had to deal with De Beers, was their name. Yeah, Jake?
I like that, what is that, it's like a diamond mine in Arkansas?
I haven't heard of diamond mine in Arkansas. There might be, but I haven't heard of it.
It's like a diamond mine or something like that, or it's a mine that you can go and you can get like some type of jewel or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, and it can be pretty expensive. So diamonds could also have some high costs to mine diamonds as well. But if you have the control, another thing is I can't remember what they call it, but your screen in your phone, there's some rare, they call them rare minerals, I think, that go into making phones and making these nice screens that are basically shatterproof and stuff. So there's some rare minerals that for phones that make them super tough. So if you can somehow control a required input, that could help create a barrier for somebody else to make phones, right? If you have the resource. Again, all of these things through innovation and technology can be overturned over time, and so we don't see people maintaining their monopoly power for very long.
Do those people that control the key resource kind of be a monopoly?
Yes, yeah. I mean, De Beers, there were periods of time where De Beers pretty much was a monopoly. They were the only way to get diamonds. So there's some good older movies. One that with Matthew McConaughey wasn't too old called Blood Diamonds. So those movies, you can kind of learn a little bit of the history of De Beers. And I think this has a capital B if I remember right. So I think it's De Beers like that. All right, so all of these things kind of change the environment that the company's operating in. So the next thing we want to do is get our supply and demand type of framework going and think about how these things are going to change the look and our predictions in the long run if there's market power. All right. So here's a graph of monopoly. So this is Monopoly. So big Q, because we're the only show in town, and somebody demands our product. So we can start with a downward sloping demand curve. And the videos that I sent out last week because of our snow day showed you what happens when there's a downward sloping demand curve to the marginal revenue. So I hope you guys watched those videos. It wasn't too long. I don't think all in all, the ones that I wanted you to watch, I don't think took any more than one class period. So you had 2 snow days. Hopefully you filled those in. But what happened to the marginal revenue, the revenue generated by an additional unit being sold when the demand curve was downward sloping? What happened to the demand curve? Kayla? It becomes more vertical, right? So there was some steepness to it, yeah. So with perfect competition, remember the demand curve was equal to the marginal revenue curve. So if the price of my soybeans were $5, didn't matter how many soybeans I made, I could get $5, which means the extra revenue generated by the soybeans was $5. And so the demand curve and the marginal revenue curve were equal to each other. With a downward sloping demand curve, that's not true. So if we quickly kind of take a look at 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units, 1, 2, 3, and our product that we've got a patent on is selling for $10. So 1 unit sells for $10. The law of demand tells us that if I want to sell a second unit, I'm not going to be able to charge $10. I'm going to have to lower my price to get another unit sold, to get $9. So to sell 2 units, I need to charge $9. To sell 3 units, this is again back to chapter 3, I'd have to sell them at $8, and then so on and so forth, right? The whole law of demand, you have to drop price in order to sell more units. So the revenue generated by the first unit was $10. But the second unit had a little funny thing going on. What was my total revenue? So if I look at the total revenue from producing one unit at Q equals 1, total revenue, price times quantity, 10 times 1 equals $10. What's my total revenue with 2 units? If I sell 2 units, what's my total revenue? Price times quantity. 18, right? So price times, at 2, I have to drop my price to 9. So I get 9 times 2 equals 18. And what's my total revenue when I produce 3 units? 24. 8 times 3 is 24. So now my marginal revenue, the marginal revenue is the change in total revenue from a change in production or sales, if you want to think of it that way. And so the revenue generated by the second unit is how much? What's the revenue generated by the second unit if my total revenue went from 10 to 18? 8, right? What's the revenue generated by the third unit? 6. Now this is kind of a mind bender a little bit, because when I make the third unit, how much am I selling it for? What's the price? $8. So I'm selling it for 8, but the revenue generated by it is 6. So I go from here to here is 8 to 6. So that's kind of a mind bender, right? I'm selling it for 8, but it only brought me in $6 of revenue. But I sold it for 8. What's going on here? Why did I sold it for 8, but by selling the third unit, my total revenue only went up by 6. Therefore, the marginal revenue of the third unit is 6. It's today's puzzle. How many of you do Wordle? No Wordle people? Really? Wordle? I don't do it either, but it seems like I'm the only one in the United States who's not doing it. Maybe the college-age students aren't doing it as much, but you guys know what it is, right? Or were you thinking too hard about this problem I posed? Okay, this really had nothing to do with it. I was just saying that this is kind of an interesting puzzle. So why does the revenue go up by 6, but yet I sell it for 8?
Is it because it's worth 10?
You're on the right track to think about the previous units. Did I sell, when I sell 3, what did I sell the first unit for? When I sell 3, what is the price of the first unit? 8. What's the price of the second unit? 8. So I think Justice was on the right track here, that when I sell the third unit, I have to drop my price to 8. So the revenue generated by the third unit is 8, but I lost $1 on the previous 2 units. So 8 minus 2 equals 6. There's your puzzle. There's your answer to the puzzle today. Okay, so the marginal revenue is something less for each one. So the marginal revenue, let me put the orange up here, and then we'll kind of draw a new graph here. So the marginal revenue of the first unit was 10. The second unit was 8. The third unit was 6. So here's 7, there's 6. What's the fourth unit? So the fourth unit, what am I selling the fourth unit for? This looks like, now it's starting to look like a homework problem here where you got to fill in the blank a little.
$7.
7, good. So for the fourth unit, I go up to here to get a 7. 7 times 4 is 28. So the revenue generated by the fourth unit is 4. So it goes up from 24 to 28, so it's 4. So now we've got 5, 4. And the marginal revenue curve is downward sloping and lies below the demand curve. All right, so that's true of that was true last week with monopolistic competition. We had a downward sloping marginal revenue curve because I have to drop the price for the previous units too. So why is marginal revenue downward sloping and twice the slope of demand? Question. Why is it downward sloping and twice the slope of demand? And the key point here is, in order to sell more units, in order to sell more, price must be dropped. Price must be decreased not only for the marginal unit, but for all previous units too. So in order to sell more, we got to decrease price. That's the law of demand. So that extra unit to sell more, we got to drop the price for all of them. All right, so one of the videos that I sent out was about price discrimination, which turned out to be a good thing, which is bizarre, or usually a good thing, I guess, if it's done legally, not on the basis of religion, race, gender, and all that stuff, although there's a little gender discrimination. Have you ever seen bars have ladies' night? So ladies' night means no cover to get into the bar if you claim to be a woman nowadays, I guess, is probably all it takes. But so that's a form of price discrimination, charging different prices to different people for the same good, right? So men and women are going into the bar and they're basically getting a lower price than you in terms of the entry fee. Maybe there's a discount on drinks too for ladies' night, or maybe that the bar doesn't have a cover charge and it's half price drinks for ladies all night and guys pay full price. That's price discrimination. So what are some other examples of price discrimination? This was actually last week's stuff, but it kind of ties in here. Who else charges different prices to different people for the same good? Jay?
Well, it could be like family. So like if you're
For what?
Like family wise, so like if your family owns a business and like you and they only like, and so just because you're family.
Family discount?
Yeah, family
Yeah,
discount.
family discount would be an example of price discrimination. Justice?
Daycare.
Daycare, how so?
Well, whenever the babies are younger, usually they charge more.
That would not be price discrimination, and here's why. So you're right, it's daycare, but are different babies of that age being charged differently? So in other words, two 6-month-old, one 6-month-old is paying one rate and the other one's paying a different rate? Or are they, it's just different compared to a 3-year-old is what I was hearing you say. So to be price discrimination, it would have to be the two 6-month-olds paying different prices, because babies are more care than toddlers, right? If we got diaper changes and other things that need to go on. Ben?
Colleges?
Colleges, absolutely. Does Ottawa University price discriminate? Yes. If they didn't, that would mean all of you in this room are paying the exact same rate for getting your degree, and you're not, right? So between athletics and academics and a variety of other factors, You all are probably, I bet there's maybe not one of you that's paying the same rate for tuition. So yes, colleges are a good example. Augie.
What about like gyms and student discounts?
Gyms, yeah, student discount is a classic one. So student discounts, you show your student ID. So there was 3 things that were required to do price discrimination. One was you needed people to be different, right? And so the student discount is kind of a classic because you've got usually poor college students and then non-college students have higher incomes, right? Because they're working or whatever the case is. And so now when you go to the movie theater, you can show your student ID and you can get a half-price ticket as opposed to maybe paying the higher price. So you need people with differing demands was kind of the start to price discrimination. Then you also have to be able to separate them legally. So a student ID, it's totally legal to discriminate against students, by the way. You're not a protected class. So have a legal way to separate out your customers. And then resale or is either cost prohibitive or impossible. So can you resell your watching of the movie? No, right? Could you resell a case of beer at the liquor store? Yeah. So the case of beer at the liquor store is resellable, and so you usually won't find student discounts because then all of a sudden it seems like you got a bunch of students that are coming in. Why are they coming in? Because they're buying my beer, right? The word is on the street that I can just reach up to a college student and say, hey, I could use a case of beer. I heard you guys get a 20% discount. How about we split that? And I give you the cash, you go run into the liquor store, get the beer, I get the beer, and we split the funds, right? So all of a sudden we're we're allowing you to have a little profitable opportunity of reselling beers. So price discrimination schemes don't work. So a lot of services, the gym membership and other things work well for price discrimination. Oriana, did you still have something? The military, how so? Okay, yeah, the military discount, absolutely, yeah. So my brother served in the military, and he's always been real good at pretty much every place he goes. Is there a military discount? Is there a military discount? Is there a military discount? Every place we go. And so a lot of places will have a military discount. So yeah, so those are all price discrimination schemes. And so coming back to this picture, what that allows the business to do is to possibly sell the first unit for $10 and the second unit for $8 and the third unit for $9. If they do that, then the revenue generated by each additional unit is the price people are willing and able to pay. And so the demand curve becomes, the marginal revenue curve starts to go this way. It starts to become it if you could perfectly price discriminate, which pretty much doesn't happen. But perfect price discrimination, if we're charging the highest price people are willing and able to pay, then that would be making this marginal revenue curve kind of creep up this direction. And it ends up being a profitable thing to do. That's why we see businesses doing it. Now I mentioned that it's actually good for the poor because it allows more people to get the good. And it's usually low-income people that are getting the good. So I heard a story of, I think it was Professor Jacobson's professor at school, that when he walks onto an airplane, and what's the first seats you come to on an airplane? You're usually heading to the back most likely, unless some of you come from very rich families, but what's the first class seats, right? So the big seats, they're sipping their cocktail and they look all comfortable. And his professor would just come down and say, thank you, thank you, thank you, as he walked to the coach class. Why is he thanking him? Because the airline's ability to price discriminate allows him cheaper tickets in the back. If the airlines had to charge a single price to everybody, then the poor people in the back of the plane would be paying higher rates, right? So the airline is able to capture the rich people over here, charge them $500 for just getting, how much extra does it cost to build a seat this much wider and maybe a little extra reclining, right? Compared to a regular airline seat. Let's just pretend that the regular airline seat can be made for $100. I bet the fancy one could be made for $200 at most. But yet the plane ticket goes from $250 to $550 or more for first class. Actually, is usually a lot higher. And so it's a very profitable thing to do because The rich people are more than willing to pay, like, what, I make $300,000 a year. $550 for the ticket, $250 for the ticket, that's a deal. I get to sit up front and people look at me and thank me as I'm going down, right? So getting those first class tickets is a way to get lower income people into the product mix. Same thing with the movie theater. Students get to go to more movies with the student discount, right? Otherwise ticket prices would be higher, you wouldn't go to the movies as much. So price discrimination is actually a good thing. As we explore this a little bit more with the marginal cost, I'll just throw one here, but if that's your marginal cost curve, then marginal cost equals marginal revenue would be at 4. But look at what happens with price discrimination. As that marginal revenue starts to move this direction because you can price discriminate, what's happening to the quantity of goods? It's going up, right? The new marginal revenue equals marginal cost is somewhere to the right of where it was before. And who's picking up those seats? The poor people, the college students, right? So price discrimination might sound not fair at first because we usually have a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, it's discrimination, that's bad. Well, it turns out it's actually good in economics class that companies can charge different prices to different people for the same good. Okay, so let's write that down here. So I wanted to say in order to sell previous units 2, and then I wanted to make a big note here. Now I spent lots of time in that video. If you guys didn't watch those videos, I spent lots of time doing price discrimination. There was a good 20-minute lecture, so I just wanted to kind of give you the cliff notes here. So note, with price discrimination, this is not true. So in order to sell more units, the price must be decreased. That's not what goes on with price discrimination. With price discrimination, that's not true. You do not have to decrease price to sell more units. I better be careful there. That's not quite. You do not have to decrease price on the previous units. Let me put it that way. You do not have to decrease price on the previous units to sell more. Sorry, I'm getting a little low here. But I'm basically just putting a counter argument to that to kind of remind you that price discrimination is a different case. Okay, any further questions, comments on that? All right, so now let's draw the real full-blown monopoly model. We're gonna leave that one the way it is and do the monopoly. Now this time, draw your demand curve so that it's touching both the vertical and horizontal axis. And then I'm going to show you a little trick. Because of the way this thing works, it's twice the slope. So it's twice as steep, and it starts up here. So kind of a nice way to draw that is if you take the midpoint of where the demand curve hits the horizontal axis, and you find kind of the middle point, just kind of make yourself a little mark, and then connect these two. And that's the marginal revenue. So it's twice the slope of the demand curve and lies below it. All right, so even the monopolists cannot escape the law of diminishing marginal product, so that means they're going to face the J-shaped marginal cost curve. The law of increasing cost. All right, justice, number between 3 and 8.
6.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Colton, how does a firm maximize profits?
When the marginal cost equals the demand.
Marginal cost equals demand. No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Robert, right? How does a firm maximize profits? This is where you guys should flip back in your notes really quick. How does a firm maximize profits? This is something you should have memorized. Jay, what do you got?
By producing the quantity where the revenue generated by the loss of units produced is just equal to the cost of that last unit.
Last unit, yep. Robert, how does a firm maximize profits? Jay, how does a firm maximize profits? Nice and loud.
By producing the quantity where the revenue generated by the last unit produced is just equal to the cost of that last unit.
Excellent. How does a firm maximize profits? Oh, I liked your start though by producing. Here, come with me. Jay, how does a firm maximize profits?
By producing the
Come on, Robert.
By producing the quantity where the revenue generated by the last unit produced is just equal to the cost of that last unit.
All right, Robert, how does a firm maximize profits? Excellent. Colton, how does a firm maximize profits?
I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what that means.
Robert, how does a firm maximize profits? Colton, how does a firm maximize profits?
Marginal revenue equals marginal cost.
No. Robert, how does a firm maximize profits? Nice and loud so Colton can hear you.
I have it now.
By producing the quantity of revenue generated by the last unit produced is just equal to the cost of the last unit.
Excellent. Colton, how does a firm maximize profits?
By producing the quantity where the revenue generates by the last unit produced is just equal to the cost of the last unit.
Excellent. All right, everybody as a class, how does a firm maximize profits? By producing the quantity where the revenue generated by the last unit is just equal to the cost of that last unit. I might have gone off my notes from last time. So, all right, learn it, love it, live it. That is the holy grail of business. They're out to make money. You're going to be working for a company that is out to make money. Every decision that the business confronts during the day, you should reflect back on that statement. Should we make this move? What's the revenue generated by that move? Now, by the way, the revenue might stay fairly flat. But if the cost of that move is less than the revenue, the cost of a different move, or the cost of what we're doing, it can start to get complicated. But each time you apply that, you're maximizing profits. All right, so now applying that up here to this new picture that we have of a monopoly. So now we are the electric company, or we're Microsoft back in the day, or the railroads, or whatever story we want to tell. If we're the only show in the town, we're the only drug dealer in town. How does the drug dealer maximize profits? How do we maximize profits on our cocaine, our marijuana, our heroin? It's hard to do. No, it's not. What is the revenue generated by the last unit produced? What's the cost of the last unit produced? If that don't match, you either increase quantity or you decrease quantity. So where that happens is right here. So the revenue generated by the last ounce of cocaine is here, and the cost of the last ounce of cocaine is here. And so we're going to make 100 ounces of cocaine. What are we going to charge for our Coke? How do we figure out how much money? So the revenue generated by the last Coke made, the last ounce of Coke made here was $20. The cost of the last ounce of Coke was $20. So I know that 100 ounces of Coke is maximizing profits or minimizing losses, right? Because check it out, if I do another ounce of Coke, the cost of that extra ounce was greater than the revenue generated by it, so that was a stupid one to make. If I'm back here, the revenue generated by another one would be greater than the cost, so I should make more Coke. So this is clearly the profit maximizing amount of cocaine to make, 100. How much should I charge? $20. Wrong. But thank you for playing our game, Augie. How much should I charge? I know that 100 ounces of cocaine maximizes profits, but how much should I charge?
Would it be up till 20?
About the
Like up till 20, so all below.
up till 20. I think I can get more. What information shows me prices that people are willing to pay for various quantities? What piece of information on this graph tells me that? What does? The demand curve. That's what the demand curve is, right? It shows you the highest price people are willing and able to pay for various quantities. It would show us for 50. It would show us for 600 ounces of cocaine. People would only be willing to pay this much for that extra ounce. So how much am I going to charge? I'm going to charge the highest price people are willing and able to pay. So I go up to the demand curve, hang a left, and read off that number. That's the highest price we're willing to pay. So where are we at here? 20, 40, making up my numbers here as we go. 60's about up there, so it looks like we're right in $52. Cocaine's going for $52 an ounce. I have no idea if my measurements are right, but you guys can just play the game and use your numbers here. But so $52. Now, if I have barriers to entry of maybe high cost or broken arms or death to a family member, should I be making some money? Should I be making some profit?
Yes.
If I'm the only seller in my town of cocaine and I have some barriers to entry, absolutely. All right, so that's going to then give us our next piece of information that we need. In order to calculate profits, what cost curve is missing? What cost curve is missing off this?
Average total cost.
Average total cost. So Augie got it.
So fixed cost and total cost difference.
So remember, the average total cost, and let me go in all its glory. This is the one I said for you guys to memorize. It's an important one. Total cost can be broken down into two types of costs. What are they? Total fixed cost and total variable cost. The average total cost would be calculated by doing that, which means I got to do that and I got to do that, which means the average total cost is also equal to the sum of the average fixed cost and average variable cost. To calculate profit, this is the one I need, right? Which includes both fixed cost and variable cost. That's why we need it to calculate total profit, which is total revenue minus total cost. All right, so that is the important one that's missing, and we are going to draw it somewhere down here. So if you do anywhere in between here, remember that it bottoms out where the marginal cost curve intersects it. That always has to hold. The marginal cost and the average total cost intersect at the minimum point of the average total. So now, to calculate my total profit, our profit equation is total revenue minus total cost. And so we've already done price times quantity minus average total cost times quantity. Just kind of restating, I think we've done this at least 5 times. But this is a good way to remember what are the pieces of the puzzle to calculate profit. And so now I can factor out that Q. And so one way to think about profit is to take the difference between the price and average total cost and multiply it times the quantity. To figure out what my average total cost is, I'm making 100 units. I go up to the average total cost curve, hang a left, read off that number. Looks like with my numbers here, that is about 32. You guys can make up your own numbers or you can use mine. It doesn't matter if your graph is drawn to scale or not. Probably easier to just copy what I have down, but your scaling might be a little different. So what's my profits? Now I've got enough information up there to actually give a number.
$20.
How much?
20.
20. Anybody else? Because that's the wrong answer.
12.
What is my total profit? Total profit. What is it, Caleb? 1,200. How'd you get that? 32 minus 20 times 100. No. I liked the first answer a little bit better, so if you guys could like team up, you could probably come up with the right answer. What's the right answer? Total profits. You're doing something right but had something wrong, and you had something right but other things wrong. What is it? 2,000. What's this number? 52. What's this number?
32.
32. And what's this number? 2,000 bucks. So you guys forgot to multiply by the 100, right? You did the average profit per unit. And then Kaylin was doing something weird. I don't even want to cover what you were doing, but you did this. You were doing something, but it's not even worth covering. So, but I liked your 100 part, so we merged them together, and we got the 2,000. All right, so you need to know what that looks like graphically. So you'll see in your homework problems and text problems and other things too. So check it out. I know I'm doing 100 units, so my total revenue, watch me here, is 52 times 100, $5,200. The area of this rectangle is total revenue, right here. Total revenue, price times quantity, 52 times 100 is this rectangle. Minus my total cost, which is my average total cost of 32 times 100, which is 3,200. That's this rectangle. Total cost. So now if I take total revenue minus total cost, what's left over? Right there. That is economic profit. Equal to 2,000 using the numbers that we just did. So this rectangle minus this rectangle gives me that one. It all matches up. Equation goggles, graphing goggles. Equation goggles, graphing goggles. They're the same thing. We're using the math in different ways. We're viewing the math to solve a problem in different ways. All right.
Yeah.
What signal just kicked on?
Exit.
Enter, not exit. Profits are good, right? These are economic profits. Enter, enter, enter. So what's going to happen when other businesses come to enter? What's going to happen in this case, if this is a monopoly, what's going to happen when other businesses come to enter?
Yeah. That's good.
They
Yeah.
won't maintain.
Right.
There's a big thing. Let's go back to the cocaine example. I go into the territory with some brand new dope. that's competing with the existing drug dealer, and I'm going to enter, what happens to my family?
They're dead.
Getting shot.
Head of the front door.
So, what's going to happen with profits in the long run for a monopoly? Are they going to disappear like we saw them disappear in competition? No. Potentially not with the barrier to entry. So I like to think of the entry as a light, right? And so lights attract bugs. Bugs are like, ooh, it's a light, there's money being made. But now there's a piece of glass in front of the enter light. That piece of glass is the barriers to entry. Maybe it's a patent, maybe it's high costs, maybe it's control of a key resource, or maybe it's violence. But there's a piece of glass that keeps the other competitors from getting into the market. And so this ends up being a long run situation. We don't have that competitiveness that's going to get rid of those excess profits. And so profits are going to remain. So do we encourage monopolies in the United States? Do we want lots of monopolies? No. So the law of the land is to encourage competition because that is the mechanism that gets rid of excessive or abnormally high profits. All right, we'll pick up there tomorrow.